Okay, great. So let me turn it over to David Drinkwine, and we'll begin the presentation. David?
All right, thanks. Today I'm going to be, we're going to be talking about business intelligence and enabling end user capabilities in SharePoint 2013. Today I'm presenting with Pallavi Tyagi and Audrey Chi from our business intelligence team, and they're going to give a lot of insight as to the kinds of information we're going to be looking for, and also some greater insight into business intelligence and the way it's evolving in the world today. Just a brief summary of what we're going to look to today. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that have arisen in the business intelligence world and a lot of the evolution and change that's going on. As with just about everything in SharePoint, and specifically with business intelligence, we're going to talk about security in ways you can prevent people from seeing inappropriate information. We're going to talk about some of the great new toys that SharePoint 2013 presents to you in terms of things like Excel services, the entire Power BI stack, which is mind-blowingly awesome, and then, of course, Visio services, which is probably one of the more underutilized features in SharePoint. And hopefully I have some time for some questions at the end, but again, just because of the smaller format today, feel free to pipe up at any time. We'll be happy to try to answer your questions. So before we get started, we're going to walk through just a couple quick demos of some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. I want to showcase a little bit about what kind of things you could surface in SharePoint. So Audrey, if you want to.
Yes, thank you, David. Do you see my screen?
We can see it.
Great. All right. So, as David mentioned, we're going to kick off this presentation with just a couple quick demos, just to give you a flavor of what we're going to talk about in today's presentation. First off, I'm going to start with something that you may or may not have heard of before, and this is the Microsoft Power BI Q&A. This is long. Q&A natural language query capability. And to define that quickly, it's within the Power BI platform. There is a really cool, unique to Power BI functionality that is called Q&A, and it allows you to be able to query results just by typing in natural English language. So I'm going to show that quickly just so you kind of have an idea before we dive into the details later on in the presentation. What you see on the screen right now is how a Q&A screen would look like for any Power BI site if the company was to implement this. And what I'm going to do is you see my cursors in this box right here. And very simply, I am going to type something that I'm curious about and which refers to our data and reporting. Let's just assume that we're doing head counting in Power BI. So I have questions about payroll. All right. So what I would maybe type in would be payroll amount total. And sometimes it takes time to render depending on the amount of data in your network. But as you see, it returned very simply with one number, and that is my payroll amount, total payroll amount. But of course, that's not what I would use a Power BI, a BI tool to do. So I'm going to add some more parameters to this. Let's say I want to look at department. So I say by department. Okay, so it brought up a different type of view. It processed the logic, and it was like, okay, this question makes the most sense to be returned as a simple bar chart. So I see all my departments down the y-axis, and then the payroll amounts across x-axis. Pretty straightforward. But let's say I want to throw in something else, which is a certain time period. So I want to look at monthly. All right, so now I've adjusted again the style of the graph, and it's become a line chart with payroll amounts along the y-axis and month along the x-axis with the department in the legend, color-coded. This view is not very nice to look at and not a good analysis tool. So I'm going to say drill down to an even more specific time frame, and I want to look at Q1 of 2013 only. All right. So now this is something that I could share with my executives or with my team or whoever it may be, and this gives a clear snapshot of by department for this specific Q1 2013 what my payroll amounts look like. And and you can obviously tweak the time period, the different parameters that I put in, like department and month. But we'll go into that a little bit more later on in the presentation. I'm just going to pass the ball over to David, and he can continue with a quick demo.
Sounds great. Thanks, Hugh. Thanks, Audrey. Give me 1 second to get the football back.
Yeah, let me do that.
Okay. So, again, some sneak peeks of what we're going to see. I'm going to show you 1 or 2 more things, probably not nearly as fun as what we just saw. But one of the things we want to show you today is how to make sort of dynamic self-created BI, where you've got the capability of making your web parts with dynamic capabilities such as with Excel, in this case, is Visio services, maybe in the term of being able to create your own, rapid-fire BI using people's innate Excel tools. So again, this is a quick sneak peek to what you're going to be looking for, but in the interim, let's go ahead and kick off a much more fun topic, which is problems with business intelligence and and sort of the evolution of how things are moving in the world today.
Thanks, David. So we got a sneak peek into the kind of demos we'll be looking at today, and to get to that point, I want to cover some concepts around BI as well as the challenges we are actually trying to solve for using these tools. So in enterprises today, BI is a very report-centric function. You have a business user who typically goes to the IT folks, asks for an ad hoc report, and the process is owned by IT, it's IT managed, and a one-time report is created, it is shared with other couple of business users, and what happens is that the process is not only time-consuming, but it lacks innovation. It is not that interactive for our end users in the organization. And what this leads to is once the business users have access to those information or BI reports, they actually start sharing it around the organization. So you'll have people emailing those reports to their colleagues, they're posting them on FTP servers, and as a result, you have all these different views and versions of the reports being circulated around the organization. And a lot of these users, they don't even have enough background or I would say context into what the data or information represents. So now you have business users going to IT, they are questioning the validity of the information shared. They are asking questions around the timeliness or the accuracy of these reports. So what this leads to are some of the challenges around BI we see in enterprises today. So you have our analysts and IT, I would say both of them actually spending a lot of time and resources in trying to solve for these requests. This definitely is not an efficient way to approach BI. And at the same time, since you have all these different views and versions of data within the organization, you're actually losing credibility within your company as well. And to add to this, from a BI perspective, organizations today are dealing with so much in-house data on the cloud, different types of data resources. So if you have a typical or your traditional BI reporting tool, you cannot easily solve for these challenges in the best way possible. So one way to solve for this, and some of our enterprises and clients we see using today, is ad hoc BI. So what is ad hoc business intelligence? So now you're placing capabilities in the hands of the business users that they can run their own ad hoc reports. It's very just-in-time report consumption. So with tools such as Amazon Web Services, you have Access, you have Excel services, the process now becomes purely business-owned, but at the same time, it's also business-managed. So here we are trying to enable our business users, but what's happening in reality is that our business users are getting overwhelmed with the amount of tools and resources they have at their disposal to try to access different types of data. So what is that recommended approach? And we'll be getting that to shortly because, like I said, similar to our initial process, which was managed by IT and owned by IT, even if we implement ad hoc BI, we are seeing similar types of challenges. In fact, now our information and BI issues are spread across multiple systems. So whenever you have multiple sources, you have multiple data systems, you're actually adding another layer of complexity because now you have to deal with information security issues, with access issues, and similar challenges to be able to establish that single version of the truth. So the solution lies somewhere in the middle. It lies in a more agile form of business intelligence, which we refer to as self-service BI. And what self-service BI refers to is that we try to strike the right balance between agility and control. So you have business users, their needs are always growing, it's almost outpacing what IT can keep up with. But at the same time, they demand that agility. And on the other side, you have your IT professionals who still want those controls, those processes, and requirements to be met. So to get to the self-service BI, you're almost looking at a process where it's business-owned, but it's IT managed. And as a result, it has impact on both these roles. The role of the end user, which could be your power user or a business user, that needs to evolve. People should be able to easily collaborate with other colleagues in the organization, share that data, and your IT professionals should be able to implement those required controls. So from an organization perspective, to enable self-service BI, we are looking at these three roles. So first, you definitely have your information workers who want access to that information, but we need data stewards in the organization who can put those controls in place, who can make sure their governance structures and information flows into the right hands. And then definitely the IT professionals who need to make sure they're tracking access, they're making sure information is being used correctly. So to put both of these together, so if you overlay the organizational structure with a business intelligence stack, and since our focus today, our team will be covering SharePoint, so how does this BI stack look from a SharePoint or Microsoft's perspective? So starting from the bottoms up, we have our IT professionals, the data stewards, who are managing all your different types of data sources. And then we are processing that information, manipulating it using the various enterprise BI tools we have available. So for example, your SQL Server, Excel services, or Visio services. Now, on top of your processing layer, you do see a security layer. So we do have two features available, which is the secure store services and the data connection libraries. And another interesting component our team would be going deeper later in the later part of the webinar today. So with these three layers in place, information can be made available in SharePoint, and then that actually enables your information worker who are able to access this information either using Power View or Power BI, which we showed a quick demo up front. You have Excel services, Visio services that can be utilized. So now going into SharePoint and what that looks like.
Sure, thanks. One of the things you'll notice as we get into the SharePoint capabilities is most of these capabilities are really weighted towards the Enterprise Edition, and that's the way it's always been within SharePoint. And Microsoft uses this as a differentiator for for different editions at different price points. But as you see, if you really want to play with all the cool toys, you have to invest in the Enterprise Edition. This applies to on-prem as well as online. You'll notice that if you get into the licensing section for SharePoint Online users, to really take advantage of things like the Power BI stack, and some of the other scoreboard, dashboard, KPI pieces, you really need to invest in the enterprise license. So that being said, let's talk about the most probably the most prevalent information when you get into BUI, which is security. I'm going to go back a slide just because it's very informative. If you look at how information flows through this system, your data lives on the back end. You've got these processing units that manage things, and somehow that information has to get to the information worker. In a lot of cases, what you're doing, for instance, if you're implementing third-party BI tools or reporting or something like that, you get into identity management issues. How do you prevent having to give every single user a different username and password for each of the applications? In a lot of cases, things like Active Directory integration and so forth can do that. But then you get into managing users on a person-by-person basis, or even more complicated ways. So SharePoint has a couple ways to leapfrog that, or at least make it more manageable. The first is one of the built-in services within SharePoint, the Secure Store service. What the Secure Store service allows you to do is keep a set of keys on the server that people can access. It is an administrator-controlled process, so you can set up a Secure Store application within SharePoint, give it a set of credentials, and then allow people access to that particular application. It allows you to sort of centralize the security based upon this. There's really no limit to how many Secure Store applications you can create. So if you wanted to create multiple Secure Store applications for the same back-end data, there's no real objections to that. And again, it's all tied in with SharePoint security so that you can add groups and so forth into the Secure Store application. There's a couple different ways you can set this up. There's a ticketing system. I'm not really going to go into this. We're going to provide the deck at the end. Probably the most normal kind is the group ticket, which means that everybody is going to have a shared authentication model. You can get very, very granular, where you have, for instance, username and password per person if you want to manage it all through here. Again, for smaller user groups, that may be the way you want to go. And it can again be very granular and supports a large number of authentication methodologies. From a per user basis, there's also a second way to create almost an SSO solution. If you've ever created data connections with any of the Office applications, such as InfoPath or Excel, you may have seen the opportunity to export that data connection file. Probably a lot of people didn't even know this capability was there. But once you set up a data connection in one of these applications, you can pass that key on to other people in the form of an ODC file. So SharePoint, being SharePoint, is a great way to collaborate with these. So you can upload these files into a centralized location that can be managed by site administrators and even portal administrators. So what I can do is, just as if it were a document library, I can give people access to this library and give people access to the keys inside. End users can then use those files to connect to back-end data. Files can be encrypted. They can be centrally placed. You can create portal-level data connection libraries. So it acts as the keys to the kingdom, if you will, where end users can leverage all this back-end data in a very managed way. So let's take a look at the fun stuff. How is this really going to manifest itself? We're going to talk about a few tools today. You'll notice that we're talking primarily around Excel services, a lot of the Power BI Stack Visio services. I want to make a point that we're not going to get into some of the bigger heavy-duty server-level tools such as SQL reporting services or Performance Point. We'll probably end up doing some webinars on those as well. Specifically, Performance Point is a great tool. But again, we could probably easily drain the entire session just talking about Performance Point. So let's talk about Excel services. A lot of these BI tools tend to be underutilized within the enterprise, but Excel services is probably the one people are more comfortable with. So in the old days, the way to share Excel files was just to drop the Excel file in a document library and let everybody hack away at it. Excel services allows you to serverize that process. Once you upload an Excel document into SharePoint, SharePoint takes over the management and control of that. But it also allows people to use all the tools they know around Excel to create their own BI. It's not a true replacement for Excel. If you've seen the Office Web Application version of Excel online, you can do a lot of stuff in it, but it's certainly not as full-featured as an Excel client. But again, it's not meant to replace that. We have implemented larger scale solutions where you can really leverage the horsepower of your SharePoint farm for large scale modeling. You'll see as we get the Power BI stack that you can really push big data around. You can do very, very complex applications. We've had clients that have reduced really complex financial modeling down that used to take hours into a matter of minutes. But again, the takeaway from this is that Excel is the #1 BI tool on the planet. According to Microsoft, there's 1 billion licensed Excel users in the world. So you probably know somebody who's got some good Excel services, and probably if you had a paper ball right now, you could probably hit one. So how does it work? Again, the rule for this is no-code development. So we're going to create, you create an Excel spreadsheet, you do all the modeling within it, you use you connect that Excel model into your data services using, say, Secure Store or Data Connection or even embedded data connections. Upload that into SharePoint, and again, SharePoint takes over. So SharePoint knows how to process the file. SharePoint knows how to refresh data. So SharePoint can even can refresh that data on a schedule. In a lot of cases, when you're doing large data sets, you don't want to try to do that in real time. So you can actually schedule that data to be loaded into your model. And then the consumer can go along, request that data or chart, and view it directly into the web browser. So let's take in terms of, again, before I show what this looks like, I do want to talk a little bit about security. One of the things we try to do as we implement any BI solution is don't just have the security in one place. Don't rely on that authentication, that user's authentication to secure every step of the way. So when a user requests this information through a SharePoint front end, first they're going to have to authenticate with whatever authentication methodology. In most cases, it's Active Directory. Then the web server is going to authenticate into it using things like Secure Store or something like that to authenticate to calculation services, which itself may have its own authentication methodology back to back-end data. Whether it's in a SQL database, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's a web service. In terms of this, it doesn't really care. It's just that we're gonna check authentication at each step of the way. So let's take a look at this. What this looks like in the real world. So as I mentioned before, it's all about Excel. People should be familiar with the Excel interface and how they can use it. In this case, what I've got is some sales data. It's a fairly decent sized sales set with about 50 or 60,000 rows. That I need to analyze on in real time. So I've got, in this case, I've connected to a back-end SQL database. And then I can do the things I'd want to do on it, which is things like I can create a pivot table. I can filter this table by whatever data I want, and then I can create my own charts and graphs and heat maps and anything I feel like off this data. Everybody, probably has seen this at one point in their lives. The fun comes when you upload this file into SharePoint. Where I can, instead of having to open this file directly and let people modify it, I can show them the data just on the screen. So, for instance, and the nice thing about that is that there's a web part already, part of the SharePoint you probably already own that allows you to display this data. You can either embed this directly as raw data on the page, or you can use any named item in Excel. So, here's a case. In this case, I've got chart 1. I've got my data table, maybe even my pivot table. But as in this case, I can take this web part and put it anywhere I want on a page. It allows users to really quickly create their own BI. We use this a lot internally, for instance, for our own project management, where users can as are participating in this Excel data, we can connect it into our backend systems and see real-time information anywhere they want and put it in line with the data that they're used to seeing. So I'm going to hand this off to Audrey, and she's going to talk to you about the wonders of Power BI.
All right, thank you, David. So now I'm going to move into some of the details and information about Power BI. You got a flavor of that earlier in the quick demo. But what is Power BI, right? Power BI is basically a BI business intelligence service that is cloud-based, and it integrates Excel BI features and then enables sharing and collaboration across your organization using Office 365. So the good thing, some of the highlights about Power BI is that, Excel is a tool that a lot of users know and love to use. As David mentioned, over 1 billion Excel users today. So it has a very low learning curve, and it integrates ETL, which is extracting, transforming, and loading data with your reporting and self-service reporting. And what it does is it does address some of the challenges of traditional BI reporting as well as other types of ad hoc reporting that Pallavi mentioned earlier. And that is that it does reduce the 100% reliance on IT, and it transforms that into more of a partnership between IT and the analyst, so that the analyst can access and work with corporate data without relying on IT and going to IT for every single question, and the analyst can themselves create personal as well as team-centric solutions so that they can make decisions based on data instead of intuition or on outdated data that they received from IT months ago, right? Okay. So a quick overview of how Power BI looks like. With any BI tool, self-explanatory, the data sources. So with Power BI, the good thing is you can utilize a wide variety of data sources, including Azure, Excel spreadsheets, OData feeds, certain external contents, and other types of databases. So from there, the data sources feed into something called the Data Management Gateway, and I'll go into the definition of that a little later. But it feeds into the Data Management Gateway, it goes through that, and then it ends up in the cloud where users can access all that you've created in Power BI. In the Power BI stack, we have a lot of functionalities. First of all, you need to manage, right? You need to manage your BI, you need to manage your data, you need to manage your reporting and users. So that includes, first of all, the Admin Center, which is where you can configure that Data Management Gateway and set up your Power BI roles and view error logs and troubleshooting, which is really important in any sort of BI tool. The other piece is called the Managed Data Portal, and this is where business users can share and manage queries and then analyze the usage of their shared data. So they can view usage analytics that's generated by the Power BI site, and you can assess what people are looking at more and what people are looking at less, and when and how. All right? And then there's the other part, which is, we covered that, the data sources. So that's where you discover, and then following that, you analyze your data. That includes Power Query and Power Pivot. Power Query is where you acquire and prepare your data. So it provides your query sharing, it's where you're able to merge and shape your data. And it also offers something called a corporate data search, which is where you can, inside Power Query, search for queries that your fellow teammates or anybody else in the organization, if they've created a query already that's relevant to your study or your analysis or your work, you can search there. And instead of replicating the entire process, potentially creating errors because you're not as familiar with the raw data, you can search for the queries that have been saved by other subject matter experts and, save time for yourself and use that one query that's standardized. So this is, if you're familiar with ETL, this is essentially your ETL tool, okay? Power Pivot is where it's very simple. It's where you create your data model. So Depending on what source you're pulling from, you may have to go through Power Query first and then feed the data source through Power Query into Power Pivot. In certain cases, internal data, you can pull directly through Power Pivot and create your data models there. And this provides the capability to support and refresh large workbooks and for you to access and match up the data from different sources. You can definitely combine different sources into one data model, which is helpful. Okay? So after you've done all that, then that's when you can set up Power BI so that users can visualize and explore what you've created. That includes Power View and Power Map. Power View is essentially where you can visually discover and share insight across all levels of your company. This Power View setup is presentation ready, it's interactive, and it's what I was showing you earlier in that quick Q&A demo, and we'll go back to that again. Power Map is another version, a twist on the visualization, and that is that it provides 3D geospatial visualization, which is essentially 3D mapping that can cover courses of time, so it can show you how data associated with maps or geography changes over time, how your data changed over time, certain heat mapping capabilities, et cetera. Okay, and lastly, there is the sharing and collaboration part. I mentioned the data refresh. You can set up automatic data refresh, so that's convenient, and that offers timely data and up-to-date data for your users. There's something called the data catalog, and I mentioned that earlier as well. That is where you can share your query metadata and other types of data for others to use. And there is the Q&A, which I quickly demoed earlier, but I will show you again. So the process, I'm just going to kind of summarize it here. You extract your data. You either pull it through Power Query, feed it into Power Pivot, or you directly pull your data into Power Pivot and create your data models. After you create your data models, you have to set up the relationships, the hierarchies, the calculations and metrics that you need, and certain perhaps key performance indicators or KPIs that your company needs. Okay? And after all that's done, all of the back-end data stuff is done, then you can use Power View, Power Map, and this is a platform where users actually access the results and are able to share and perform analysis on the data. So quickly, before I go into a more in-depth demo, there are many benefits of Power BI, and just a few are, it provides a cloud-based infrastructure. So instead of having everything physically, everything's in the cloud, and your queries can be based on a wide variety of data sources. And it creates a centralized location where people can access and share the single version of the truth, so to speak. Information workers can find reliable and trusted data without having to go to IT every single time. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the demo and show a few more things that are pretty cool as well. So this view is different from what you saw earlier. It is how a Power BI site would look like for any company if they set it up. You'll see that it says Solon Consulting Team site. This is our demo site. But any other Power BI site would look very similar. There are featured reports, featured questions, other documents on your home page, and that provides a quick access point for people to click on something that's more popular or more frequently used. So I'm just going to open up the featured reports and show you a few things, and this will be what I was referring to as Power View. All right, so I referring to this headcount analysis earlier, so we're going to go back to this. You'll see this first tab. We see earnings by company over time. This view is broken down into different types of graphs. It's showing payroll amount, earnings by month and by city, and it's a stacked bar chart. And it's very interactive, so you can mouse over any of these bar pieces, slices, and you'll see the more detailed numbers in case some of these are closely sized, right? And there are more granular charts below that in pie chart form and in normal bar chart form. So in the case that I do want to drill down on my data, it's very simple. I for example, want to look at San Francisco only for the purpose of my analysis. So I click on the color for San Francisco in May 2013. And what it does is it automatically refreshes the graph below, kind of like a filter functionality, and then you're able to see specific to San Francisco in May 2013 what was going on, okay? And you can at any time return your view to default by just clicking in the background of the chart, and it just goes back to how it looked like originally, which is very useful. Right, and this is a different type of look and feel. You'll see this is an analysis on tenure. So you'll see that we're, in this case, examining different types of roles of the employees and how long they stay at the company, and perhaps we want to figure out why the engineers stay the longest at this company. Let's click on engineer, and again, it is very interactive, and it will automatically act as a filter and refresh the other two charts to look at engineers only, so that you can have a deeper dive into the data. Okay, that's just a quick look of how Power View and your visualizations could look in Power BI. I'm going to go back again to the Power BI Q&A natural language query just to show you a couple more examples, because I was just briefly skimmed over that earlier. All right, I'm going to, in this case, you'll see this is familiar, same screen. I'm going to look at physical headcount. So I'm going to start out with, headcount, total headcount. Okay, again, it's thinking, and then it gives me, again, a simple one number, whole number headcount. And I want to look at, let's say, a specific date. Okay, so now it's a much lower number because I'm looking at one day only. But then I want to look at, again, department, right, and location. Okay, and you'll see that it thought about this. And because you asked about location, so it brought back, instead of a line chart, a bar chart, it now has a map view, which is really cool. And in a lot of cases, you'll have to click on Enable Content. All right, so this is now a view of your total headcount on May 20th by department, which is in this legend, color-coded, and by location. So you have individual pie charts on top of every single city that we were just looking at. And it breaks it down by department. So you can really get a quick snapshot and quick feel of what your headcount looked like on that page. So I'm gonna do a different variation of this question. Right? You can always tweak these questions to look at something else. So instead of looking at a specific day, I actually want to look at over time. So cumulative. Okay. So I'm going to say headcount over time. So now it's showing not a map, of course, because I'm not asking about location. It's converted itself to a line chart so that I can see from January 2010 to July 2013, how does my headcount look like? Okay? But because I'm curious about the accounting department, I'm going to type that in. Okay, so it adjusted slightly, and this is now reflective of accounting, and you'll notice that what showed up is a legend on the side because I did specify a specific department. And then I'm going to look at only 2013 Q1 once again. All right, so now you get a much more dynamic, much more ups and downs type of a line chart that shows you how your headcount looks like specific to the accounting department and for a specific quarter. Okay, and you'll notice that as I was typing in the English questions, I didn't have to do anything to select the visualization or whatnot. But you're not lost. You're not limited to what Power BI determines for you. You can actually come to the side here in the list and select a different type of view if you feel like that's more representative, that's more intuitive of the data you're trying to show. Okay, so that was a more detailed demo on Power BI. I'm going to pass the mic over back to David.
All right, thanks. Okay, let me get caught back up. So I'm going to include this with the deck. Again, it's going to be available for download on our bigappleSharePoint.com site. So I'm not going to go over a lot of the new capabilities. Some of them are new in 2013. Some of them are new within the last service pack. One of the things you're going to see is that there's some capabilities online and some capabilities on-prem, and I'll address that if we can as well. So the last piece I want to talk to you about is Visio Services. Visio Services operates very similar to Excel services in that it'll take your lovely Visio diagram and present it to the end users. In a lot of cases, what I see is when we find people using Visio Services is people will create static diagrams and workflow and network diagrams and that sort of thing, and just stick it onto their site, which is a great use of visualization. But to make it a little more exciting, you can actually take this data and connect it to external data. A lot of people don't seem to realize that you can connect Visio diagrams into back-end systems. Again, this is a very much a self-service UI type, a BI type process. By allowing people access into data, by using things like Secure Store or the data connection libraries, you can give people very selected data sets and be very selective and secure about the way that you're sharing that data. And then let people be creative, whether it's using Excel services or Visio services or any sort of the visualization tools that people are used to. So just in terms of how it works, very, very similar to what we saw with Excel services, is that people are going to create these data-connected libraries, upload them to SharePoint, and then let SharePoint take over. So that when the consumer comes along, they can go ahead and request that and ensure they're getting nice, secure, clean, lovely BI. So in terms of what this looks like, let's go ahead and take a look at a Visio services solution. So here's something I've built out in Visio. I'm actually very lazy, so I actually, got a nice free downloadable map of the world and connected this to my data. In this case, this data comes from a SharePoint list, but it could easily come from any other data set. And then I can overlay these data diagrams directly onto this. So in this case, I've created a call center mapping application. I can see all my different call centers around the world and get some real-time information as to staffing and percentage to my target, which is great. I can put this up. If I open this file up in SharePoint, it's going to render just as if you would open it on your desktop. In a much more practical way, what I want to do is make this part of the way I work. So I can create this data-connected library, data-connected Visio diagram, and stick it on a page using a Visio web part, which, again, you already have. So in this case, what I can do is you have a lot of different options as to how you want to present it. I can give people the capability of refreshing their data in real time. So we're going to re-query that data, and it hasn't changed a whole lot. But in this case, we can also have the page refresh on a regular interval. Usually, I've seen this done in 5 to 8 seconds. You'll also notice that in all these web parts, what we're doing is we're doing an AJAX refresh versus having to refresh the entire page. That way, if you have other data or other or multiple diagrams or spreadsheets on your page at the same time, you don't have to reload the entire page, and everything's going to operate independently. I also, in this case, want to give, I have some options whether I want to give people the capability of opening and modifying these diagrams as needed. SharePoint security trimming is going to take care of a lot of this for me. For instance, if I have if I don't have the capability of updating this document or reading this document directly, if I only have view-only rights, I won't see that open in Visio icon up here. All right. So tying this all back together, again, I'm not going to talk about that. The idea is that you want to be able to, from a SharePoint world, include this into how the people work on a day-to-day basis. That's why people get into SharePoint in the first place, is you want a nice centralized place where you can work together. So in this case, what I've done is I've created, this is a project management site. Just want to show you a couple things. So a lot of the things you're used to seeing in Excel, for instance, I've got my new project timeline view. I've got some embedded Excel where I can do charting, graphing, and so forth. I've got heat lines that can give you some nice visual representation of the intelligence that's going on. And in this case, I've also got a server status web part that I've created using Visio, where I've actually connecting to a SCOM service, so I can see this information in real time as we're building out and working on our IT projects. So here's your takeaway as we're quickly running out of time. In a lot of cases, it's get out of the way. You want to be able to manage the access to the data in a really real and controlled way, but you want to give people the freedom to be agile, because that's the lifeblood of your enterprise. That's where people are going to come up with new ideas that are going to drive things forward. And by being a good data steward, what you're really doing is giving people the ability to trust you and trust the data. We talked about that a little bit at the beginning. But if you think about the way a lot of enterprises work, it's as quickly as a game of telephone breaks down, you'll see that information can break down as well, and you want to be able to give people the best information possible in a way that they can trust. All right. I think we've got a few minutes left for QA. So does anybody have any questions? Great. All right. We come up on something's come up on our
David. This is Michael.
Yeah.
I wonder if we had a few questions online. First of all, I wonder if you could talk about what capabilities are end user ones that end users could easily take and use, and which might need some administrative work before being turned over to end users. It's easy to distinguish some of those or call some of those out.
Yeah, I can address the Excel services in Visio, and I'll hand it off to Audrey. In terms of Visio and Excel, the admin functions tend to be around setting up security and defining what data you're going to allow people access to. So again, that falls into that sort of data steward role of I'm going to make data available to people and let them play with it. Again, those are two. This is more user-friendly BI creation, in that hopefully people know how to use a lot of the tools already, or there's plenty of training and learning resources on how to use Excel and how to use Visio. When you get into things like Excel and Visio, you do have to realize there's a few restraints or constraints around some of the functionality. It tends to be more in the fringe area of how people use these tools. A good example is neither Excel nor Visio services really likes Vista macros if you're using coded solutions within your application, which makes sense from a farm management standpoint. You don't want to let people create their own code and upload it to run rampantly on your servers. There's actually ways around that where you can actually generate user-defined functions and some other things, but for the most part, the much more advanced features like heavily coded solutions are going to be off the table. Audrey, do you want to talk about Power BI and the end user capabilities?
Yeah, so very similar to what David has just been talking about. Power BI, I mentioned earlier in the presentation that you can manage in your admin center and in your managed data portal. And all of this is considered, admin access. And within your administration, you can set up your roles. So you can give certain levels of security to be able to look at certain data sets and not see certain other data sets for a particular user. But in order for you to really be an admin in your Power BI site, you, of course, require a license from Microsoft to do that, to be able to do more of the back-end stuff. But in terms of the end user, any end user can, for free, access anything that's in browser. So they just need an Office 365 account to be able to log in. But online, you can anything that I demoed earlier in browser, the Power View stuff, the Q&A stuff, that's normal capabilities for the end user.
Thanks, Audrey. All right, Michael, do we have any other? I realize we've got about a minute left. All right then. Okay. Again, we're going to make this recording and the presentation available on BigAppleSharePoint.com. Feel free to check that out, and our information is available as well. So feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions about what you've seen today or how you can make this work for you. All right. Thank you.